Hi, my name is Maggie Umberger, and I'm a mindful movement specialist dedicated to helping you feel good, build strength, and unlock your potential. Today, I want to jump right in to talk about a question that I get often before and after class, as well as even by email. And it's breaking down the elusive Chaturanga Dandasana, or four-limbed staff pose. I want to talk about this pose in particular to give you some tools that you can apply right away to your own practice to help you build strength. And I want to talk about this pose because I think it's a great example to share with you how I like to look at breaking down postures and movements in general, not just four-limb staff pose or Chaturanga Dandasana. This is a pose in yoga that we do so often, in vinyasa yoga particularly, because it's part of the sun salutation sequence. It is a pose all by itself. It's not a transition, but it's also a really challenging posture to be in. So we don't have a ton of time to perfect it. We basically get the breath out to be in that posture before we're moving. I see a lot of regular yoga practitioners who are on their mat often, moving through this posture particularly quickly. And that's probably because it's hard. And when we get in the habit of moving in a certain way, it takes a lot of mental focus to dial it back and to retrain our brain and our body to move differently. And so I think that these little things that we can tweak can be hugely impactful. But before I give you those little tips and some different ways to think about this posture that have helped me, I want to talk about why and how I break down poses when people say and ask me, am I doing this right? We know there's not just one way to do anything. There are many rights that might just be the one that is the right way to do something for us in any given moment or day, or just depending on what our goals are. But when we sort of lock into this idea that there is one way to do things and that we only pay attention to certain cues, our bodies can get really used to moving in that particular way. So you'll develop a lot of strength doing one particular type of push up, one particular variation of a chaturanga, and we might be missing out on some potential other ways to build strength if we think about a few other cues. There's something called the principle of specificity, and that's basically that the human body will tend to get better at what it is already practicing. So someone who is a jogger will probably develop more cardiovascular endurance and strength and get better at running. And that idea applies to a lot of what we do in yoga, where if we're always moving in one specific way, we're going to get better and better at moving in that specific way. And that's wonderful to have goals and to want to build strength in certain ways. But when we want to create more balance for the body overall, it helps me to think about different parts of the body, paying attention to different cues in different ways, and really thinking more holistically in order to prevent injury from happening down the line. So, how does this apply specifically to Chaturanga Dandasana? Well, let me just show you how it happens to progress, or maybe the shape regresses over time when we start to move faster in one specific way and when I'm thinking about one specific cue. So if I'm thinking, I hear this a lot in Chaturanga, elbows by your sides or hug the elbows in. So if I'm really focused on hugging my elbows in, that's my main focus. A lot of other stuff gets left on the table. I lose a lot of integrity in the front of my shoulder because my sole purpose has been hugging my elbows beside me. So I'm going to give you a few cues and a few different things that I like to think about. And they aren't things that you need to do all the time, but they might help you just introduce some more variety and more options into your practice. The first one, and this is going to sound weird because in a vinyasa yoga practice, when we're moving fast, this is a really hard one to implement. But my first variation is I just don't do Chaturanga Dandasana at all. Because if we're always doing narrow push-ups, again, that principle of specificity, we're just going to keep getting stronger or potentially weaker if we're overdoing it in that narrow push-up fashion. A traditional push-up, which helps us build more pec strength, chest strength, and overall shoulder stability and awareness, has your hands a little bit wider and your elbows moving out on an A frame or about a 45-degree angle versus close to your sides. I'll probably never squeeze my elbows close to my sides, but you can see the difference of a narrow versus a wide push-up. So sometimes in a practice, if we have stepped to a plank position and I know we're moving into a chaturanga, I will put my knees down and I will widen my hands and I will literally take a full push-up and come back to downward facing dog from there. So it's not at all in the flow, but it's something additional you can add to your practice to help you promote some more balance. Now, if you're moving into chaturanga and you just want to add some additional levels of strength, think about not only what your upper body is doing, but what's your lower body doing? Can you bring more of your whole body into this experience? I really like to squeeze a block between my legs to make everything feel a little bit more secure, because when you can squeeze a block, you get your adductors on. Your adductors have a direct fascial connection to your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor is the bottom of your core. So essentially, we're helping like zip up the jacket of our core when we squeeze something between our legs. So if you're in your push-up position, again, it will take a little bit of time to get into it. If you are used to moving faster, you'll have to squeeze the block between your legs first. I like to wrap my triceps back just a little bit so that my elbows aren't out, but I'm not squeezing in so much that I'm going to block my rib cage. I take a little bend of my knees. I squeeze the block. I connect to my core. Now, as I shift and I lower just about halfway down, I might even bail and put my knees down there. I start to feel a lot more of a total body connection. And that's really what we want in almost all of the yoga poses that we find, is how can we bring more connection from head to toe of our bodies together to create a posture? Because it's just like the idea that one person carrying a really heavy load is going to get tired pretty quickly. But if you can distribute that heavy load that you might be carrying among 5 people or 10 people or a whole community of people, then it becomes quite easy, quite simple, and a lot more sustainable to make that action happen. Same thing is true with all the muscles in our body. So the last cue, and the one I've already kind of spoken to it, but just not lowering down quite as much. You can bring your hands right underneath the shoulders. You're still setting up for your chaturanga. My legs are still active, even if I'm not squeezing a block. I'm going to wrap my triceps back just a little bit. And as I shift, I'm not shifting too very far. I've still got my core intact. I'm only going to come less than halfway down. When I do that, it gives me more awareness of the whole shoulder girdle, of this entire experience of the upper body. And ultimately, like the thing that's helped me the most when I am in that pose, which is quite a challenging pose to hold, and then when you're in it, hard to think, what am I doing here? Like, what am I really feeling? What can I remember from this movement that I might want to implement the next time I'm here? I just try to think, is any part of my body gripping? Is any part holding me up that is really distracting, taking my attention? If I'm feeling it in my neck, that's telling me something. If I'm feeling it in the front of my shoulder, primarily, that's telling me something. If I can find a sense of balance in the pose where I've got all these little checkpoints, like I feel my feet, I feel my quads, I feel my core, I do feel my shoulders, but I also feel this fullness across my mid-back. I'm not crunching down and I'm not dumping into the front of my shoulder. I feel a balanced sensation of work. Then I know I'm on the right track. So I encourage you to play with your movement a little bit, which might mean completely ditching the movement, adding in some props to the movement, lessening the range in the movement, and seeing what you can learn while you're in it. Ask yourself that question: where am I feeling this? And then finally, when you're practicing a movement like this, it can be a lot to be in it, to hold it, and then to transition into something like an upward facing dog. So again, this is an invitation just to give yourself some other bailout strategies so that you don't always have to roll over your toes and come into an up dog, but instead, maybe you are coming down halfway on your knees and then just letting yourself drop the rest of the way down. You can always reconnect, work your hands back, and find an up dog from there. But just know that there's no right or wrong way. You're not experiencing the pose incorrectly. You're not doing anything wrong if you choose a different route. So I just encourage you to play around with some of these options. Feel this total body connection, really remembering your core and your lower body as you're moving through these transitions to get into Chaturanga. And then when you're in it, being really tuned into what are you feeling in the moment. And then let me know what questions you have, what shows up for you. And be sure to subscribe to my newsletter to hear more movement tips just like this, as well as to get free full-length classes and lots more. I look forward to seeing you on the mat soon.